Our story follows a lone adventurer who defies a taboo by eating monsters. Each time he consumes one, his dislocated hand and wounds heal, and he gains the monster's skills such as roar and bowlax. A nobleman's diary once declared that devouring monsters is forbidden in this world. For a human to eat a monster means to absorb its evil essence. The first symptom is an indescribable euphoria accompanied by physical strengthening. The second symptom brings severe headaches, nausea, and intoxication. The third symptom is sudden death or possibly transforming into a monster. Our protagonist, however, continuously slashes and consumes monsters, gaining new skills with each meal. A few minutes later, he faced a huge python while devouring another monster, acquiring agility boost and lightning cloak skills. The python swiftly lunged at him, its mouth wide open to devour him whole. He waited until he was inside its mouth, then activated his new lightning cloak skill, electrocuting the python and killing it instantly. He continued deeper into the labyrinth, killing and eating the monsters in his path, gaining even more skills. After consuming a huge spider, he acquired thread manipulation skills, which he used to trap the surrounding monsters effortlessly. Exhausted and full, he believed he could now return home safely. But his hope was shattered when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps and saw a swarm of monsters glaring at him with rage. He cursed in frustration and vowed to survive and return home alive. In the frontier city of Bologna, a territory known for its multiple labyrinths, there is one called the Miasma Labyrinth. The air inside this labyrinth continually saps the strength of visiting adventurers who loathe it. Yet our protagonist, Rude, frequents it so often that he has earned the nickname Miasma Scavenger. On the 6th floor of the dungeon, he smiled upon seeing a patch of miasma grass. He knew that miasma grass had the ability to purify the labyrinth's toxic air and was an invaluable source of income for him. As he began to harvest the grass, he resolved not to take too much, just what he needed. After gathering enough to last him around 3 days, he started to leave, smiling at his fortune. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him and turned to see a swarm of miasma rat monsters glaring at him angrily. He rushed at the rats, which released poison in response. He knew many monsters in the labyrinth used miasma and poison, contributing to the adventurer's aversion to the place. However, these tactics were ineffective against him. He slashed one of the rats, angering the others, which then jumped at him to attack. He managed to slash another, but one rat clung to his arm and tried to bite his head. Fortunately, his arm armor blocked the attack. Just then he heard someone shout, "Fireball!" and a fireball struck the rat on his arm, throwing both him and the rat to the ground. He saw the rat explode, which surprised and stunned him for a moment. As he regained his senses, he heard an irritated voice complain about missing the target. A dark-haired man scolded a brown-haired man, who had cast the fireball, for not getting closer before attacking. Rude recognized the group from the Adventurers Guild by the emblems on their coats. The brown-haired man reached out to help Rude up, apologizing for the fireball and asking if his name was Rude. He explained that they just wanted to help since Rude seemed to be struggling. However, Rude stood up without accepting the man's hand, thanked him for the sentiment, and asked that he give a heads up before doing anything like that again. The man was annoyed and replied that was why he shouted fireball. Then a chubby man called his teammates over, excited about the miasma grass colony they had found. Rude, shocked, asked if they had been following him for his harvesting spot. The man furiously glared at him and insisted they were just fellow adventurers making a living in the labyrinth and happened to meet Rude there. They had saved him in the process. The man then angrily shouted that Rude, known as the Miasma Scavenger, couldn't even express proper gratitude, which angered Rude. However, seeing them ready to attack, he calmed down and apologized, thanking them for saving him while enduring his frustration. Later, in Bologna at the Fully Belly restaurant, Rude was thrown to the floor. A bald man shouted that Rude's presence made the food smell terrible. Another man teasingly told him they were saying this because he couldn't seem to understand it. The man then walked closer and held fire near Rude's face, taunting him that an adventurer should be able to defeat monsters. He insulted Rude, saying his skill, abnormal status nullification, was trash and didn't make him a real adventurer, which hurt and angered Rude. Abnormal status nullification was Rude's unique ability. which made him invaluable for exploring the miasma labyrinth. However, it didn't grant him the necessary skills to defeat monsters, vital for any adventurer. Without combat skills, he was unwelcome in any party and earned the nickname Miasma Scavenger because he scavenged for items in the lower levels of the labyrinth. In other words, his supposedly useless skill made him an outcast as an adventurer. Although he was a grown man, he still had to fight life-or-death battles against mere rats, making him wonder if he would spend the rest of his life as the Miasma Scavenger. The next morning, he headed to the Adventurers Guild, knowing he needed to find another miasma herb colony while he still had some money left from yesterday. He noticed the guild was unusually noisy, with adventurers bustling around. Curious, he asked the receptionist if any good requests had come in. She recognized him and informed him that a new labyrinth had been discovered. This news surprised him, as a new labyrinth meant treasures and magical items, a golden opportunity for any adventurer. He realized this was why the guild was so lively. The receptionist then told him that starting today, the price of miasma herbs would drop from 100 gold to 30 gold. Shocked, he loudly asked why. She explained that the miasma labyrinth was never popular, and with everyone heading to the new labyrinth, there would be no demand for the herbs. This news made him worry and panic. She continued, saying the new labyrinth was in the Avelio Mountains, but he wasn't allowed to go there. When he asked why, she explained that the new labyrinth's exploration requirement was to be D rank or higher, and as an E rank, he wasn't qualified. Frustrated and desperate, he pleaded with the receptionist, asking if there was any way he could join the expedition. She sighed and told him those were the rules, and even if he went, he would only end up dying in vain. Suddenly, a man appeared behind him and said that if Rude wanted to go that badly, he should join his party as a porter. The man then smiled at him softly. Later, they were on their way to the new labyrinth, traveling inside a carriage with Bayer's party. Bayer smiled and told Rude how glad he was to meet him because he needed someone to carry materials from the new labyrinth, but hadn't been able to find anyone. Rude remained silent, thinking it was probably because all the adventurers in the guild had flocked to the new labyrinth, making it difficult to secure a porter. One of Bayer's party members spoke up, asking why they were diving with a miasma scavenger of all people, and suggesting that Bayer could have found someone better. Bayer shyly told his members not to say such things. He explained that since Rude had been an adventurer for a long time, he had been a very good. It was better to have him along rather than a complete newbie. Bayer then introduced himself as the leader of the Scarlet Sword Party and introduced his members, Sasha and Rick, who were both D-rank adventurers. Root introduced himself as an E-rank adventurer and said it was a pleasure working with them. Before diving in, Bayer asked to know more about Root's status and if he minded showing his guild card. Root agreed and retrieved his guild card from his bag. He opened it to reveal he was level 7 with health 22, strength 18, endurance 16, magic 9, spirit 7, and agility 15, along with his skills. Bayer was amazed to see that Root could use fire magic. Root explained that the power was too low for use in battle, but came in handy in dark places and for cooking. Bayer laughed and told him that it was still plenty helpful, so he was counting on him. Later, they arrived at their destination, which amazed Sasha and Rick. Bayer announced their arrival at the recently discovered Avelio Labyrinth. Sasha excitedly asked if it looked like they were the first ones to arrive, and Rick eagerly suggested they start exploring immediately. They opened the gate, but their excitement quickly turned to disappointment as they saw the labyrinth was already crowded. They headed to the right and saw adventurers harvesting herbs. On the left, they saw adventurers fighting monsters. When they explored further, they found adventurers opening chests. Sasha, frustrated, shouted that there were adventurers everywhere, which was annoying. Bayer told his team that it seemed like most of the first layer had already been explored. Rick asked Sasha if she wasn't the one who said they were the first to arrive, which only pissed her off more. Rick then suggested they dive deeper, reasoning there would probably be fewer people further down. Sasha agreed, but Bayer cautioned that since it was a newly discovered labyrinth, it would be better to start by mapping the first layer. Sasha snapped, asking if she was hearing the porter giving his opinion, and Rick called Rude an old man, saying that was why he was stuck in E rank. Bayer told Sasha and Rick to quit it, assuring them Rude didn't mean any harm. Bayer then said he agreed with both of them, because if things continued like that, they wouldn't get any good results, so they would aim even deeper. Later, they arrived on the 4th layer of the Avelio labyrinth and faced a huge wolf monster. Rude was shocked and scared, but Rick easily hit the wolf with his weapon, telling Rude not to be so scared of those small fries. On the other side, Sasha used her magic to electrocute the monsters, while Bayer slashed through his side with his sword. Rude was in awe of their strength, yet he couldn't move his body. A moment later, when the last wolf fell dead, Bayer sheathed his sword. Sasha, sitting next to a treasure chest, said diving deeper was the right call, and it felt nice without the other parties around. Bayer agreed, noting that the monsters weren't too strong and they had found some treasure. Rick then called out and ordered Rude to collect the materials from the monsters he had defeated. Rude replied that he couldn't because the monsters were too damaged and their magic stones were probably shattered. Rick angrily asked what if they weren't destroyed and told him not to slack off. Pissed but powerless, Rude agreed and went to collect the materials. As he approached the wolf Rick had killed, he noticed the mangled body, with guts and blood making it smell awful. He wondered if Rick really had to go that far. Lifting a small flame on his finger, he wondered if it would be better to burn it a little. Rick noticed and laughingly said the old man had started burning the monster and asked if he was going to eat it. Rick then joked that after exploring for a while, he was starting to feel hungry and even the monster's meat looked delicious. Sasha told him to stop because it was gross and reminded him that it was taboo among adventurers to eat monsters since the mana would be absorbed into their bodies, and no one knew what would happen. Rick assured her he was joking and said when they got back, he would use his earnings to eat as much delicious food as he wanted. Suddenly, they heard a terrifying scream from a monster which horrified and stunned them. A huge monster then appeared in front of them, a minotaur, a B-rank monster. Rude couldn't believe it, wondering why such a formidable creature was in a lair so shallow. Sasha shouted that there was no way they could beat something like that and stutteringly asked what they should do, saying he would use some items and told Rude to keep an eye on the monster's movements. Rude stutteringly agreed and asked Bayer if he had a plan. Bayer smiled creepily, raised his sword, and replied that he had a great one. Suddenly, Bayer slashed Rude's back, causing him to fall in pain. Bayer called for Sasha and Rick. Rick threw his axe at Rude while using his warrior's encouragement skill, making Rude the focus of the monster's attack. Rick's axe slammed down near him, and then Sasha used her haste skill to double their speed. Rude stutteringly asked if they had planned to abandon him from the start. But Bayer just asked why they would bring the miasma scavenger otherwise, which both angered and horrified Rude. They ran away, with Bayer shouting for Rude to buy them some time. Rude cursed them in anger. When the Minotaur raised its axe, he focused his gaze and dodged its attack. He slammed to the ground but taunted the Minotaur, saying it served him right. He knew it was the end for him as the Minotaur rushed at him again. It slammed him into a wall, making him cough up blood. The force of the impact cracked and collapsed the wall behind him, revealing a hole on the other side. Both Rude and the Minotaur fell through, crashing to the floor inside the hole. Rude opened his eyes, incredulous that he was still alive. He looked to his side and saw that the Minotaur was caught under the rubble. He knew it was only a matter of time before he died too. Even if no other monsters came, he would die from blood loss or starvation before his body healed. Feeling an overwhelming hunger, he looked at the dead Minotaur, tempted to eat it. He asked himself what he was thinking, knowing that eating a monster would only lead to disaster. He closed his eyes, reflecting on the miserable life he had lived. But then he remembered an adventurer's advice from his childhood: no matter how hard or painful it gets, never give up. Driven by those words, he made a desperate decision. He began tearing into the dead Minotaur's flesh with his teeth, knowing full well the risks. A human who has depleted their magic and consumes mana-rich monster meat will have the monster's mana particles invade their body. The monsterized state is a terrifying fate, worse than death by poison, which is why it was a taboo. In a gamble to regain the blood he had lost and sate his hunger, Rude brought about an unexpected transformation. A moment later, he walked deeper into the labyrinth, dragging the Minotaur's axe. He came upon a corridor full of bat monsters hanging from the ceiling. With monstrous eyes, he growled, catching the bats' attention. They flew down to attack him, but he used his new skill, Roar, which intimidated the opponents with a thunderous sound, hitting every bat close to him. More bats descended to attack, and he used his physical boost skill, temporarily enhancing his strength. He swung the huge axe, crushing the bats to death. He grabbed one of the bats and ate it, gaining the echolocation skill, which allowed him to detect surrounding creatures even in darkness. Using this new ability, he saw more monsters deeper in the labyrinth, noticing they were coming in swarms. Confidently, he asked them which one of them is going to get eaten next. A moment later, Rude was slashing and continuously killing monsters. He noticed that the battle axe fit perfectly in his hand, and he could sense the monster's magic without even having to look at them. After killing them, he devoured them and observed that each time he consumed a monster, his injuries healed and power surged through his body. This newfound strength helped him continue fighting the swarm of monsters confidently. Later, he emerged from the labyrinth. As the light hit his face, he was stunned and surprised. Letting go of the axe, he was overjoyed to have made it back and shouted happily that he had survived. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, the atmosphere was tense. Adventurers looked at each other in fear as an old man stood before them. The Bologna Branch Guild Master, Lankars, addressed the Scarlet Sword Party, stating that after hearing their report, he had rounded up all the adventurers in the labyrinth except for Rude, who was with them. Bayer replied that when they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they had a chance to protect him, expressing frustration that they couldn't save him. Lankars acknowledged their explanation and declared the labyrinth off limits for now. Just then, the guild door opened and the receptionist was shocked to see Rude enter, stunning everyone who believed he was dead. Bayer, Sasha, and Rick began sweating in fear, and even Lankars was surprised to see him. Bayer rushed to Rude, feigning concern, and whispered threateningly that if Rude said anything unnecessary, he would kill him. Rick asked if Rude was hurt, and Sasha claimed they had tried to go back for him, but the labyrinth was closed. Rude felt Rick's grip on his shoulder tighten. Bayer then suggested sweetly that they should celebrate Rude's survival elsewhere. Bayer and Rick exchanged glances when they realized they couldn't move. Rude then shouted that they had used him as a pawn, causing panic among the Scarlet Sword Party and shock among the other adventurers. Bayer, panicking, asked what Rude was talking about. Lankars demanded to know what Rude meant by being used as a pawn. Rude explained that Bayer had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. Rick had used a skill to lure the Minotaur toward him, and Sasha had cast haste on the others so they could run away. Bayer, in a defensive panic, shouted at Lankars that they didn't do any of it. Lankars told them they needed to clarify the truth of the matter. Just then, the Truth Officer entered the guild, shocking everyone. They wondered why the Truth Officer, who rarely left the royal capital, was there. Lankars explained that there had been an unusually high number of deaths among the porters temporarily joining Bayer's party, so he had called in an old favor to bring the Truth Officer there. Lankars then asked the Truth Officer to determine the truth of the claims between Bayer's party and Rude. The Truth Officer's eyes lit up as she declared that the members of Scarlet Sword were lying. She raised her wand and confirmed that Rude's claim was the truth, horrifying Bayer and shocking the other adventurers. Panicking, Bayer shouted and pointed at the Truth Officer, demanding to know how she could possibly know the truth. Lankars explained that the truth skill was impossible to acquire later in life, and its effectiveness rivaled that of a unique skill, meaning no lie could pass before the truth skill. He emphasized that nothing could be more trustworthy than the words of someone who had pledged to dedicate that power to the country, glaring at Bayer in anger and making him step back. Bayer then looked at the Truth Officer and thought that if only she weren't there, none of this would be happening. In a desperate move, he launched his sword at the Truth Officer, shocking Lankars and the Truth Officer. But Rude acted quickly, blocking Bayer's sword with his own just in time. He warned Bayer not to dare touch the Truth Officer, shocking Bayer, who angrily shouted Rude's name. Rude responded by punching Bayer in the face, sending him flying into the wall with such force that the impact was visible outside the guild. Sasha and Rick were horrified, but Rude calmly told Bayer that attacking the Truth Officer was not a good idea. Later, in the Adventurers Guild reception room, Lankars apologized to Rude for bothering him when he must be tired. Rude replied that it was okay, and asked about the Scarlet Sword Party. Lankars informed him that the three would be taken in by the staff for interrogation. if it's confirmed that they repeatedly used their porters as bait. The members of Scarlet Sword would lose all their possessions and adventurer qualifications, reducing them to slaves. Given that Bayer had crossed the truth officer, he likely wouldn't appear before Rude again. Rude was surprised when Lankers placed a bag of gold on the table, explaining that since the Scarlet Sword Party lost the right to profit from the new labyrinth, Rude should receive it. There was about 200,000 gold inside. After their discussion, Rude left the room and silently stared at the bag of gold in his hand, hugging it. He realized that this money could cover his living expenses and would take a long time to accumulate by gathering miasma grass. This made him realize that adventurers could actually make good money. He noticed other adventurers silently glaring at him, guessing that no one insulted him because of what they had witnessed earlier. However, he knew this didn't mean they would be kind to him either. He also knew that standing out too much might make others suspicious of his sudden rise in status. So he guessed he'd have to continue earning in the miasma labyrinth as before. He sighed, telling himself to stop being gloomy because he finally had some money and he could get his gear ready and eat whatever he wanted. He decided to head to the tool shop first and was surprised when he saw a magic bag. Afterward, he decided to get something to eat. The next day, he was back in the miasma labyrinth, easily killing the rats. He couldn't believe how easily they fell when he had to avoid 5 of them just the day before yesterday. Using his appraisal skill, he looked at a dead rat on the floor. It was level 9, its race was Beast Tribe, with health 24, strength 5, mana 16, spirit 3, endurance 12, agility 27, and its skill was miasma. He figured out that the appraisal skill he obtained by eating the Cyclops monster could even be used on corpses. He grabbed his guild ID, wondering how much his status had increased, and opened it, thinking he must be around level 20 because the rat was easy to defeat. To his astonishment, he saw that he was still ranked E but had reached level 42. His health was 188, mana points 136, strength 156, spirit 112, endurance 136, and agility 125, an incredible increase from before. He couldn't believe he had reached level 42 when just yesterday he was only at level 7. Realizing how rare this was, he decided to check the skills he had acquired. He opened his skill status and was excited to see he had gained many new skills. He remembered passing by the spot where he had fallen on the way back from the new labyrinth. The wall that had been broken was now sealed, and the new labyrinth would remain closed for a while. So, he planned to lightly explore the miasma labyrinth to test his new powers and see how effective they were on the deeper floors. He glanced at his side, where he had the magic bag he bought earlier, and headed to the stairs leading to the higher floors, wanting to choose the right monster for his first try. Later, he easily cleared the 6th, 9th, and 13th floors, but was disappointed because they didn't provide a challenge. He needed to go even farther to find more suitable prey. A moment later, he arrived at the 24th floor and saw a huge monster in armor guarding the area. He saw it walking around and used his appraisal skill on it, revealing it was a lizard soldier, level 25. From the dragon tribe race with good stats and skills like one-handed swordsmanship, shield techniques, and miasma resistance. He knew they were supposed to fight in coordination with their companions, but he only saw one and smiled, thinking it might be worth a try. He appeared behind the lizard soldier to attack and swung his sword at it. The monster immediately turned to face him, but he managed to slash its arm. He taunted it, saying it wasn't bad, but he wouldn't miss next time. Confused, he watched as it started to run deeper into the 24th floor. He chased after it, wondering if it was trying to escape. He was shocked when he realized it was a dead end. Approaching cautiously, he told the lizard soldier it couldn't escape now, but it just smiled and peeked back at him, glaring. Rude felt a presence behind him, cursing under his breath. When he peeked back, he saw more lizard soldiers closing in. Realizing it was a trap, he braced himself for the impending fight. He realized he had been set up. Given the disparity in their levels, the situation was dire. Suddenly, the lizard he had been chasing attacked him. Fortunately, he dodged and faced it, thinking that if he had to, he'd take them down one by one. He jumped and attacked one of the lizards. Though it blocked his attack, the force of his strike slammed it to the floor. As it glared at him, he raised his sword, ready to kill it, thinking he would end it right there. But another lizard, wielding a shield, blocked his attack, surprising and confusing him. Before he could react, he sensed a presence behind him and ducked just in time to dodge the lizard's attack from behind. It growled in anger, but he calmly told it that it was close and asked how many of them there were as the lizards surrounded him. He looked at them, astonished by their ambush tactics and coordination. Even if they were good at working together, their movements seemed too precise. Then he recalled a high-pitched sound just before they began coordinating. Noticing a red lizard behind the attacking soldiers, he used his appraisal skill. His power revealed it was the general lizard, level 32, a beast species with 116 health, 54 magic, 88 strength, 77 spirit, 68 endurance, and 69 agility. It had 3 skills: one-handed swordsmanship, shield technique, and command. He smiled, realizing he had found the boss. The general lizard screamed loudly, and the lizard soldiers screamed back, launching at him together. He activated his physical boost, screamed, and charged to meet them, slashing every lizard in his way. One lizard blocked his path, but he jumped on its head and vaulted over it, heading straight for the general lizard. It stared at him, and he told it he had found it. He swung his sword, but to his shock, it remained unscathed. The general lizard then launched its sword at him. Panicking, he knew he could dodge it, but instead he activated his steel body skill, becoming unscathed as well. Smiling, he told it that it wasn't the only one with a trump card, making the general lizard jump away to create distance. He activated his appraisal skill again, puzzled that there wasn't a single scratch on the general lizard despite feeling the impact. He confirmed that the general lizard didn't possess a skill that enhanced its durability, and suspected someone else's power was at play. He scanned the lizard soldiers, but couldn't see any particularly special skills. Then he found it. The lizard soldier in the far back had a substitute skill. He headed towards it, realizing it was taking the damage instead. Shocked, the lizard couldn't run away. He successfully stabbed it with his sword, telling it that it must be tough being reduced to a substitute. The lizard shook in pain and fell to the ground dead, as he told it not to take it personally. The general lizard screamed in anger and charged at him with its soldiers. He used his thread manipulation skill, grabbing the thread to hang above and dodge their attacks, shocking the general lizard. Swinging the threads on his fingers, he told them that gathering together made it easier for him. He threw a thread trap at them, and though the general screamed orders, it was too late. The trap ensnared the soldiers with the general, immobilizing them. He descended in front of the shocked general, telling it that it seemed like his victory, then slashed the general lizard's head. After slashing off the general lizard's head, he swiftly dispatched the remaining soldier lizards. Once the battle was over, he exclaimed excitedly, "It's time to eat." He reached for the magic bag he had bought with the money from the guild, knowing it was finally time to use it. The magic bag's interior space was expanded by magic, and its weight was completely reduced when closed. He took out his cooking utensils and seasonings from the bag. He then began to skin the general lizard, reflecting on how, when he was on the hidden floor, he had been desperate to survive, but had always wanted to try this. After expertly carving a perfect piece of meat from the lizard, he placed it on the pan and added some seasoning, wondering if monster meat could be delicious if cooked properly. As he watched the meat cook, his mouth watered. Taking a big bite, he chewed thoughtfully, amazed at how delicious it was. He continued eating, marveling aloud. Who would have thought monster meat could be so good? I might get addicted to this. As he ate, he acquired 4 skills: one-handed swordsmanship, shield technique, miasma resistance, and command. He pondered how monster meat could be so good, and whether it was related to the magic powers the monsters possess. He recalled the skills from the Minotaur, Armor Spider, and Evil Eye, which had been quite helpful. He also remembered the Thunder Wolf and the Black Serpent, whose skills he hadn't yet tried. After finishing his meal, he stood up excitedly, planning to try eating a variety of monsters on his way back. He looked down and saw the lizard with the substitute skill, making a mental note of its usefulness. A moment later, in the miasma labyrinth on the 21st floor, he encountered flying monsters and frog monsters. Activating his lightning cloak skill, he electrocuted them to death effortlessly, clearing the floor. He realized his lightning cloak skill was highly effective, especially against monsters specializing in inflicting status ailments. They had picked the wrong opponent. Taking out his pan, he excitedly declared, "Frog meat and insect dishes, coming right." He cooked the meats, making a fried chicken-like dish from the two monsters' meats. He happily eats the dish, noticing how soft the poison frog is and how the seasoning reminds him of Morpho, making him crave a beer. As he finishes, he acquires 5 new skills: venom, temperature variation, poison scale powder, paralysis scale powder, and aerial slash. Suddenly, he hears a loud crash and what sounds like a human voice. Curious and cautious, he wonders if other adventurers have made it this far. Quickly, he packs his pan into his magic bag, thanking it for the meal, and runs toward the source of the sound. It's rare to see other parties in combat, and he hopes he might exchange valuable information with them. Meanwhile, a scene of violence unfolds nearby. A man's sword drips with blood as a group of men gathers around a woman lying on the ground bleeding. She clutches her wounded shoulder, gasping for breath, while the men taunt her, mocking her for still having so much magic left. The man with the sword smirks, remarking that the trouble was worth it. He pulls down her head coat, revealing her elven features, and the greedy men smile as he wonders aloud how much she might be worth. But then Root arrives just in time and addresses the men, expressing his hope to make some adventurer friends, surprising them. He steps closer, stating that, while he doesn't know the full story, he can't stand by and watch a woman being attacked. The man with the sword demands to know who he is, and he replies that he is an adventurer. The woman, desperate, shouts a warning. Those men are adventurer hunters. Realization dawns on him. Adventurer hunters are notorious high-ranking adventurers. Using his appraisal skill, he identifies the man who stabbed the woman as Falses, level 65, in a miasma state. However, he's shocked to find he can't see Falses' status and rank. He checks the 3 other men and discovers he can't see their statuses, skills, or ranks either. They must have concealment skills or counter magic tools. Falses orders his men to take him down, and the confrontation begins. One of the men, named Xerius, launched an attack on him. He was surprised by Xerius's speed, but fortunately, he managed to block the attack with his sword. Xerius teasingly remarked that he was doing pretty well, to which he replied that it was because Xerius was weak. This comment infuriated Xerius, who pressed his sword harder against him, shouting that he was not weak and that he was going to smash his head in. The other 2 men watched the confrontation silently. He inhaled deeply and activated his venom skill, spitting venom onto Xerius's face. The venom melted Xerius's face, causing him to scream in agony. The other men called out to Xerius in panic, questioning if he had just spit venom. They both thought it was almost as if he were a monster. He knew it was a reckless way of fighting, completely unlike the typical adventurer, but it was how he, a weak person, had survived. Falses asked if that poison was a unique skill, acknowledging that it looked like he couldn't be underestimated. False has then ordered his men to charge at him, all 3 of them. The 2 men moved forward first, swinging their swords at him from different sides. He realized that if he stopped dodging for even a second, he'd be killed. He jumped backward to create distance between himself and the 2 men, but suddenly a foot appeared in front of him. He was shocked to see Falses ready to kick his head. He immediately activated his steel body skill. Falses' kick connected and he was thrown into the poisonous swamp. Falses realized he was tough, certain he had broken his neck. He stood up while the brown-haired man excitedly declared that he was going to snuff out his life right away. However, he just stood up and ran deeper into the swamp, prompting the man to shout at him not to start running now. When the man was about to chase after him, Falses ordered him to stop, warning that the poisonous swamp wasn't a place one could venture into and come out alive. He reminded the man that they shouldn't be able to withstand the poisonous swamp either, and that he would come out soon enough. A moment later, he was still in the swamp. They asked him how long he planned to stay in that poisonous swamp and told him they should compete like adventurers. He knew he was lucky to have fallen into the poisonous swamp. On top of the usual miasma, the poisonous vapors around the swamp would also rapidly drain the adventurer's stamina. The men were exhausted from the poison surrounding them and asked how long he planned to stay in the swamp. It had been about 10 minutes already, and they felt their heads hurt and their bodies grow sick. He walked out of the poisonous swamp, thinking it should be about time. He wanted to weaken them further, but if he took any longer, the the situation would worsen since the lady was injured. As he approached them, he asked how it felt to be affected by both poison and miasma. The men in return asked if he had finally given up, telling him he had caused them a lot of trouble. He calmly replied that, unfortunately, he was unaffected by any status abnormalities, so he didn't really know how much pain they were all feeling. Falsis was infuriated when he realized that he had the abnormal status nullification skill and had tricked them. Falsis shouted orders to his men to kill him immediately. The men rushed at him. One of the men tried to slash him, but he easily blocked the attack, surprising the man. He pushed the man back, smiling as he explained that the poison in the swamp gradually drained their stamina and the accumulated miasma inside their bodies lowered their stats. He sensed someone approaching from the side and saw the brown-haired man ready to attack. He immediately used his steel body skill. When the man struck, his sword hit steel, shocking and confusing him. He then released electricity, activating his lightning cloak skill, which electrocuted the two men. One of the men died, but the brown-haired man, still conscious, tried to attack again, cursing in anger. He released a strong power from his hand, using his aerial slash skill to strike. Falsis, watching, couldn't believe he possessed venom, a steel body, a lightning cloak, and even the aerial slash skill. Fear gripped Falsis as he asked why in the world a human had monster skills. But he rushed at Falsis, replying that he had no obligation to explain. He attacked Falsis, who tried to block, thinking that despite his supposed superiority in fighting humans, the miasma was going to cause his defeat. In a rage, Falsis used his agility enhancement and launched his sword at him with all his might, unable to accept losing to someone like him. Brood activated his physical boost and counterattacked. One of their swords broke in half. It was Falsi's sword. Falsis' body fell to the ground in half, but Rude knew that without the abnormal statuses, Falsis would have been much stronger.